Welcome back to All Church Sunday School. It is time for Sunday School, whatever time it is that you are joining us. Jamie and I always imagine this virtual class and we're all together and we're excited to be in the same room together. So this is our space for doing that when we can't all be physically present. And we are exploring the Gospel of Mark. We're excited about the journey. If you've been with us before, you know we took a little detour last week because things were changing rapidly in our country and we wanted to pause and pray together as a class. And we thank you all for participating in that. Any prayer requests that came in after our session last week?
We had a couple. Mark Gaston sent us a prayer. He actually put it on Facebook, but I didn't see it pop up until after we had closed our prayer time. So thank you, Mark, for sharing your prayers with us. And then also we got an email from Zena saying that she was praying for the clergy and the ministry of UCC and as also praying for guidance for our nation and for our state and for our community.
Those prayers are continuing, I know, for everybody this week. So please, at the end of our class today, you'll see an email address. We'd love to hear from you, and we are continuing to pray as a Sunday school class, as a faith community, for the days ahead.
And I look forward, too, to that opportunity when we're back in person again, because that will happen at some point in time.
I believe.
For us to maybe do something like this actually in a Sunday school classroom.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
With real people.
And see each other.
Yes. It'd be great.
There's nothing better than real people. That's what I say.
Amen.
That's what I'm missing so much.
You're real people even if we can't see you.
I know. We just imagine. We imagine everybody taking this in. And I hope that means you've got your Bible in your lap on the table in front of you. We're still in Mark chapter 1 because a lot happens in the first chapter of Mark.
We hit the ground running.
It really is. And we have just passed, you know, we took a little detour and looked at a scene at the end of chapter 8 and the beginning of chapter 9, talking about kind of a scene of tension and conflict. And took a little detour so that would kind of fit in with what was going on in our world. But we're back now to moving through the first chapter. But I want to tell you a story first, Jamie. Okay. And I've got some pictures to show you. This is a picture of a museum on the Sea of Galilee that houses an amazing discovery. This part of chapter 1, Jesus is walking along the shoreline, Sea of Galilee, calling his first disciples. And so this museum is perched on the Sea of Galilee, and it houses this amazing project. I'm showing you pictures of what happened in 1986.
That was the year I was born.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Well, in 1986, the Sea of Galilee got really, really low because of a dangerously extreme drought. And two fishermen were out on the sea one day earning their living when they noticed some shadows that really interested them. And so you can see the Israeli government issued a special order to lower the level of the sea because the feeling was this was a really important finding. And buried in the mud, they found a boat from the 1st century.
Holy cow.
Which is amazing. Covered up, preserved by the mud over all of this time. So extracting the boat from the mud and protecting the boat became a significant project. You can see how they're wrapping it. This is the picture that I love the most, how they're moving it to its current location, very carefully wrapped. What a shame it would have been for the boat, preserved as it was, to then come apart as they were trying to move it someplace where everybody could enjoy it. And here is what it looks like inside the museum. Everybody who comes to the museum sees this 1st century boat. Now, I noticed as I was doing a little exploration, people asking, this is really the boat that Jesus was in? No, this isn't. We can't be that specific. But this is a 1st century boat. And so you see you can really see the shape of it. And the museum does a wonderful job of helping us appreciate what it was like to be fishing on the Sea of Galilee in the first century. How many people made their living, what that was like. Jesus is going to go to fishermen as his first recruits for his work. So look at these pictures that I found, Jamie, and let me know what you think. The oldest one is the calling of Apostles Peter and Andrew. How do you think you would say that artist's name, using your best Italian?
Oh, no, this is going to, oh gosh. Duccio di Buoninsegna.
That's very good. That's very good. Now, what do you notice about the three characters? Peter, Andrew, and Jesus.
Well, Peter and Andrew are dressed relatively plainly. It looks like they're in the middle of hauling in a net full of fish. While Jesus kind of has a distinct look to him, dressed a little bit differently, maybe to distinguish himself to the observer of this photo. I mean, the boat. I look at the boat, and then I've got the photo of the first century boat right next to it. The real Jesus
boat. So this is a deeper boat.
And it is a little bit deeper.
But they look like working men.
They do look like working men. Older. They look older as well. The white hair and white beards.
All right, now look at the next picture. This is Caravaggio. We have in our gallery at the church the calling of Matthew by that same artist. But this is the calling of Saints Peter and Andrew. What do you notice in this picture that grabs your attention? Which one is Jesus? Tell us that.
I'm going to assume that Jesus is the one with the white kind of sash going across his front. And similar to the first picture, both Peter and Andrew are bearded. Peter, one of them, whoever that is, if that's Peter or Andrew, is holding something.
I think it looks like a fish and something else. Does that look like
yes,
a fish and something else? Maybe
I'm assuming to the first viewers of this painting that would be an indicator of his profession or something, some sort of fisherman.
And Jesus gesturing like, "Come with me."
We're going.
Yeah, you can really see
kind of same
with his hands. But I don't think that's what Jesus looked like. Do you?
Probably not.
No, that's not what Jesus looked like. All right. Here's a contemporary artist.
This is what Jesus looked like.
No, this is a contemporary artist, and you see multiple people on the boat. The boat looks a little flatter, doesn't it? A little bit more like the Jesus boat. And I like the way they're all turned toward Jesus. Part of me thinks this might be when Jesus, which is a story in a different gospel, tells them to cast the net on the other side of the boat. Does it look like he's giving them instructions?
It definitely does, and I like that you pointed that they're all, or at least 4 of the 5 are looking at him. I can't imagine that they looked up at every person that wandered past them. If this is the Sea of Galilee and a relatively busy shoreline, they're probably mostly focused on their work. But I'm sure they would look up if an observer told them that they were doing their job wrong, or to maybe try it a little bit differently.
I think there was something magnetic about Jesus. I think that when Jesus passed, you couldn't help but be engaged, at least curious. But I think for these fishermen, there was something, they knew their lives were changing that day.
Absolutely.
Let's read the story. Read the story to us. Let's read just part of our assignment for this week, and then we'll tap the brakes and talk about it.
Okay, so we'll read Mark chapter 1, verses 16 through 20, this first go around. As Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for men." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. As he went a little farther, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, who were in their boat mending nets. Immediately he called to them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him.
So let's pause for a minute. This is very simple, very straightforward. When I was a teenager, read the story and imagined that I was there in the boat or along the edge of the Sea of Galilee and Jesus passed by me. And what would that have felt like when he looked at me, when he called me by name, when he said, come and follow? Would I be able to lay everything down and go? I have curious about what happens to these men and the family they leave behind as they get up and go. And then I began thinking, and then I'm interested in your thoughts, about when I was growing up, the fishers of men that I knew were the professional evangelists who would go to small towns and come to my church, and maybe they would preach all week in the evenings, or maybe they'd be there for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and they were extraordinary preachers.
Yeah.
And they told great stories, just like Jesus did. You were so caught up in the stories they told. Of course, it was fresh material because it wasn't the preacher I heard every Sunday.
Yeah.
But you were so caught up in the stories they told. I mean, so compelled. There were people, the altar calls in the evening resulted in people joining the church, which didn't always happen on Sunday morning with the regular preacher. And I thought, as I looked at these verses, that I got to see some fishers, some people fishing for humans, some people gathering in people. Because of the gospel, because of the good news. What's your thought about that? You didn't have any evangelists coming to talk to you.
No, I didn't. I was a part, though, of Young Life for a while in high school, and I was a Young Life leader for part of my undergraduate time at TCU. And there is really, especially in the Young Life camping system, this ability to kind of draw out of young people the desire to follow Jesus. We can talk about some of the tactics maybe another time for doing that, but there is something about an electric public speaker that can convince people to do quite a variety of things. I wonder, when we talk about Jesus recruiting his first disciples, if it was Jesus's personality, or if these folks just sensed that something was different.
I think it was both and.
Yeah.
I think there was power there, even in the spoken word. There was, for these, wouldn't you imagine these men who made their living fishing were kind of skeptical. We're not, necessarily very educated. And there was something here that spoke directly to their hearts, I think. Something in Jesus' presence. I think you're right about the presence part is read as well as the words. Now, we see them drop everything, even leave their father behind. See ya. Did Zebedee ever see him again? Did they ever swing by and say, did they go home for Christmas? We don't know. But what we're noticing, this very distinctive, abrupt confrontation with Jesus. I found some words from Fred Craddock about that. He writes, the story is so brief as to be called telescoped. I think that's a really interesting way to describe it. That is, an event that may have transpired over a longer period is presented as swift and complete. The fact is, Mark gives no details as to what might have been telescoped, and the absence of details makes the story even more vivid. Isn't that interesting to think about?
Very, because, you read this story and you think, okay, well, Jesus was walking down the coast and he stopped at one boat and he got 2 followers, and then he walked to the next boat and got 2 more followers, and then the 5 of them kind of carried on their way. And I really like the last piece of what Craddock says there. The absence of details makes the story even more vivid. We can imagine the first encounter that each of these men had with Jesus, and if it was a longer period of time over which they got to know him, and he was telling them a little bit about what he was planning on doing, just kind of building interest and building interest and building interest.
We have to be curious, were these men of faith at all? Were they already faithful men? And so it was easier to plant seeds. Did Jesus have to plant some seeds and wait for them to sprout? Yeah. How long did it take? I think the brevity is one reason that I liked the Gospel of Luke more because there were details, and I like details. I like to imagine as much as I can from the words that I'm given. But I like the dramatic impact of Mark. If he's telescoping these stories down to the essence of what it's about, I like that too.
Me too.
I like fewer words.
Me too. Why use 100 when 20 will do?
That's right. All right, let's read some more. Now we're going to encounter the first miracle in the Gospel of Mark. There'll actually be 2 miracles before you finish reading, but and then we're going to talk a little bit about miracles.
Absolutely. So the telescoping kind of continues into these next verses as well, because they're off the boat really quickly, and then the next thing that we hear is this story starting in Mark chapter 1 verses 21, and we're going to go all the way through 45.
I think even as we think about where we've already passed, the wilderness experience is about 1 sentence, right?
It was 4 verses before we started today.
It's fast.
12,
it's just so
16.
That telescoping, that pace, that immediately, and then the next big event happens in very few words. That may be what one of the things we love about Mark by the time we get to the end of this.
I think so, because it's kind of like one of those old toys where you would crank up like a car or wind it and wind it and wind it, and then you're holding it there and you can feel like the tension in the whole thing, and then you put it down and it just zooms.
And it just goes, yes, that's a good comparison. I like that.
That's the Gospel of Mark. All right, so here we are, Mark chapter 1, verses 21 through 45. They went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus entered the synagogue and taught. They were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. Just then there was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be clean and come out of him." And the unclean spirit, convulsing him and crying with a loud voice, came out of him. They were all amazed and kept asking one another, "What is this?" A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him. At once his fame began to spread throughout the surrounding region of Galilee. As soon as they left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. Jesus came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Then the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick or possessed with demons, and the whole city was gathered around the door. And he cured many who were with sick with various diseases, and cast out many demons, and he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. And Simon and his companions hunted for him. When they found him, they said to him, "Everyone is searching for you." And Jesus answered, "Let us go on to the neighboring towns, so that I may proclaim the message there also, for that is what I came out to do." And he went throughout Galilee, proclaiming the message in their synagogues and casting out demons. A leper came to him, begging him, and kneeling, he said to Jesus, "If you choose, you can make me clean." Moved with pity, Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, and said to him, "I do choose, be made clean." Immediately the leprosy left him, and he was made clean. After sternly warning him, Jesus sent him away at once, saying to him, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded, as a testimony to them." But he went out and began to proclaim it freely and to spread the word, so that Jesus could no longer go into a town openly, but stayed out in the country, and people came to him from every quarter. So we conclude the first chapter, and Jesus is already famous. I don't know.
Just moving fast.
Here's my thing about the leper, and I might be jumping out of order of what you had planned. I don't know how Jesus could have expected the leper to not tell what happened.
Well, or for people not to notice.
I mean, hey, guy who's been rejected because you have a contagious disease that's decaying your body. Welcome back to the temple.
That's caused you not to be able to be part of the community again, and now you're back.
And now you're in the synagogue,
cleansed.
You're making offerings, you're healthy again. What happened?
I ran across in in the commentaries I was looking at comments about we see Jesus engaged even in the first chapter of Mark, healing people, and our 21st century sensibilities would be what a compassionate person. He sees suffering all around him.
Yes.
You know, the whole village is coming to him that evening, and man, he's got his hands full. He's probably exhausted. Makes me think in a way almost like our emergency rooms are now, overwhelmed because of the pandemic. Jesus, just wherever he went, there were people who needed to be healed. And so we see this as an act of compassion. But the commentary I read said it would be different for a first century audience. This would provoke, who is this person? Not, oh, isn't that nice that he's healing everybody, but where does that power come from? Who is this?
Interesting.
So it was an identity thing. This commentary said in all of the Gospels, healing stories were about Jesus' identity.
And we catch that a little bit too in this passage when he is teaching in the synagogue, and he, where is it? Verse 23-ish. They were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes. It kind of indicates that the scribes, those who normally doing the teaching about the laws and everything that
how to follow the rules,
that this was more just of an informational session than a voice of authority kind of commanding an audience. So we get that signal, and then the healings begin. So that kind of, that plays right into the point that you're talking about.
That it's an identity thing, it's a power thing. Here, let me just read this one comment to you and see what you think. The Gospels are filled with Jesus' miracles and accounts of the acts of power that take place through him. This fact embarrassed some earlier generations of biblical interpreters who sought to provide rational explanations for the miraculous and to relegate these accounts to pre-scientific status of the biblical writers. I heard that kind of justification when I was growing up. So that's not so long ago. Well, in today's terms, we would say that this is probably epilepsy and, that it needed to be scientifically sound. And I heard, as I was reading through the stories as I was growing up, I heard that explanation. The commentary goes on. Today, the miracle stories of Jesus are sometimes said to be a stumbling block to faith for those enmeshed in a scientific culture. However, the miracle stories are significant as expressions of the authority and power. These in themselves are a witness to the kingdom of God, which is underway and characterized by such acts, and to the future time when the reign of God is established in all its fullness. So it's about identity. Who is this man? What is his source of power? What do these events mean? Jesus will talk about the kingdom is drawing near. When you're in a place where people are being healed, where the leper's walking down the street and he's perfectly fine now, that's the kingdom drawing near.
Absolutely. I love that imagery, and it feels to me like the disciples' identity statement can be drawn out of this whole conversation. Just this idea of being a movement for wholeness in a fragmented world. When you start to see the pieces being put back together again, those are some signals of what's about to come.
That the kingdom is near.
Absolutely.
And we, the already and the not yet, we are living in a time where we get glimpses of the kingdom.
Absolutely.
Not as many as I'd like. But we get chances to participate in that kingdom drawing near. So these miracle stories are much more than, oh, what a tender heart Jesus had and he didn't want anybody to suffer. So we see him healing Simon's mother-in-law.
Yes.
I remember reading that and thinking to myself, wait, he's married? He has a wife? That probably means he has children. We don't hear anything in this telescoping. Yeah. It's like Simon exists unto his own, but he has a mother-in-law. So, and then in these two healing stories, the first of which, that person, that unclean spirit inside that person knows exactly who Jesus is.
Yes. And this is that trend early on of Jesus trying to keep things quiet. And we see, obviously, later in chapter 1 that fails miserably. But just this secrecy and this, I'm not quite ready yet, or, whatever it might be. But but people and other beings are starting to really quickly name.
Isn't it interesting to live in a time where celebrity is sought after at all costs?
It is.
And to pass by this story and see Jesus keeps trying to push it back.
Celebrity.
Fame is spreading. No, that's not what this is about.
I wonder if celebrities have a different feel, because I wonder sometimes celebrities desire anonymity. And
maybe once they get celebrity,
true,
then they see, oh, this has a downside that I didn't anticipate. Yeah, that could very well be. Well, we're off to a strong start because Jesus is already exhausted and having to go off and hide so he can even have prayer time. We get to see these in the Gospel of Mark, a busy season, and then we see Jesus attending to his own soul and his own health and well-being. And then somebody like Simon comes up and says, hey, everybody was looking for you. Where did you go? So we will continue to watch how Jesus attempts to manage that. But,
absolutely. He's already had to change his plans.
Yes.
Just a little
bit.
bit.
Stay out on the edge of town. Don't go into the coffee shop.
Nope. Everyone's going to swarm you.
So we'll watch him adjust to that as well. Well, we talked about how much we would love to hear from all of you all. That always counts. Here's the email address. Jamie and I both see that, and we can reply. And that is fun. If you have personally seen the Jesus boat, which is what they call the boat that's in the museum, although we don't have it directly connected with Jesus, I'd love to hear about that experience. It was an amazing experience for me. And what's our assignment for next week, Jamie?
Let's all gather together to read chapter 2. So if you want to pre-read chapter 2 of the Gospel of Mark, so that when we come back together for our conversation, you already have in your minds kind of what we're going to be talking about. Bring maybe your favorite translation, whether that's NRSV or Common English or whatever it might be, and let's do some comparison. We tend to read NRSV. If you have a different translation, read that ahead of time.
It's sort of illuminating. I think it's great to always have at least two ways to look at the words. What if they have a question that arises from their reading of Mark chapter 2? Can they send that to us in advance?
Absolutely. If you email us ahead of next Sunday with questions or thoughts or comments about Mark chapter 2, please send them, because we can incorporate those into our conversation, maybe address some of the questions that you have, explore those together. We love to be curious people here at All Church Sunday School.
If we were all in a Sunday school classroom, we'd be all talking probably at the same time.
Absolutely.
So we're anxious for your voice to be part of what happens next.
Definitely.
In the meantime, keep praying for our country. We'll see you next week. Bye.